At Kina Mutual Group, we believe that a brighter financial future should be accessible to everyone. That's really important. Kina Mutual Group and its foundation has a long-standing history of investing in the community where we have a footprint. Every year, we're averaging at least 9,000, 10,000 volunteer hours that are reported and recorded. But each one of those community members always says to me,
Our home is the training ground for her dreams policy from American Family Insurance. Insure carefully. Dream fearlessly.
Hi, I'm Kim Sponham, CEO and President of Summit Credit Union. We are so excited to sponsor another Madison 365 Women's Leadership Summit. Women's financial health is especially important to us at Summit Credit Union, and we've focused on it for more than a decade. Women are twice as likely as men to associate negative emotions with their finances, and it's no mystery why. Women still earn less than men for a variety of reasons. Women have less saved for retirement, and they're almost half as likely to invest in the stock market when compared to their male counterparts. But we're also seeing positive signs. There are more female entrepreneurs than ever before, and we know from experience that women with higher levels of financial literacy tend to save more, spend more wisely, and invest more than their peers. I encourage you to use this conference as an opportunity to improve your own financial literacy and find inspiration in the incredible women joining us today. Thank you for letting us be a part of your journey.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. So happy to have you guys with us. My name is Nephertera Best, and I'm honored to moderate today's panel, the Mentor Chair, where we will meet 4 women CEOs of color in Wisconsin as part of Madison 365's Women Leadership Summit. Again, my name is Nephertera. I'm an entrepreneur and communications professional who co-founded 2 public relations agencies, one in my hometown of Milwaukee and the other in Charlotte, where I currently live. We serve clients in the government, corporate, and nonprofit sectors. I'm also the founder of Milwaukee Small Business Week, which will be returning in person very soon. Today's discussion will be powerful, but before we dive in, let's get to know our dynamic panel. I'll make it easy and go in alphabetical order. We'll start with Nancy Hernandez, followed by Dr. Mayzee Her, and then we'll hear from Adonica Randall. Nancy?
Thanks so much, Nephertera, and thanks so much for Madison 365 to put this programming together and really all the fantastic programming you guys do. So humbled to be a part of it. Nancy Hernandez, I am president and founder of the Hispanic Collaborative, which is a civic initiative to get Milwaukee into a top 10 city on the Hispanic Wellbeing Index. But I have also owned an ad agency since 2001 called Abrazo. I stepped away from running the day-to-day to get the civic initiative off the ground. So you can say that I wear 2 hats right now. Happy to be here.
And I'll go ahead. I'm Dr. Mayzee Her. I'm the CEO of the Hmong, Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce, and we are a statewide CDFI, or Community Development Financial Institution, here in the state. And we really exist to uplift some of the most underserved, economically underserved communities throughout the state, and really helping more specifically small businesses. Just happy to be here. We're headquartered in Milwaukee. We have a couple of we have a satellite office in Wausau, a shared office in Madison, and hoping to continue to grow throughout the next several months here. So again, thank you also to Madison 365, and happy to be here with all of you.
Awesome. Adonica?
Hi, pleasure to be here today and to be asked. I'm the president and CEO of Baxent LLC, which is a technology brokerage firm. We are nationally based. We are 20 years old, and I'm also the CEO of a second company, Abacor, which deals in working with underserved populations to move from where they are to work. And both companies are national, that have been around. Abacor is 1.5 years old. As I said, Baxent is 20 years old, and happy to be here today.
Thank you. So as you all can see, Madison 365 has put together a powerful panel. So let's go ahead and dive into the discussion. We've all heard the phrase that your net worth is in your network. So the first question is, how has building a personal network, which is basically your own community of professionals and friends, how has building a personal network helped position each of you for success? And I'd love to hear from each of you on this.
I'll be happy to start us out, Neff, if you want.
Absolutely.
So a saying that stuck with me early on is one that said, it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. And I think that just talks a little bit about the network and what really needs to take place in that personal network to have more worth to both sides of that equation. It takes some investment on knowing them both as professionals and friends, right? And understanding how their goals coincide with your goals. We need advocates talking about the work that we do in ourselves as individuals, in the rooms that we're not in, and the board tables that we might not be sitting at. That definitely has an influence, and we've probably all been involved with decisions where we see that take place. And so a network is exceptionally important, both as an individual and as you lead an organization with its vision and mission. But it's not just about having the network. It is about really understanding its true value, creating win-win situations with those individuals, and really understanding how to work it. And it sounds bad, right? Work it. It's not like you're working it, but really understanding that there's two sides of those equations, and it takes investment and care to really kind of activate your network.
All great points, Nancy. Adonica?
I'll take the ball from Nancy on that. The network basically is everything for Baxent. Our model is based off of a network delivery system. We really, as a broker, think of us as the people we can ideate things, we can solve the problems, and we can create the blueprints, but we generally deliver the answers through our network. So over the last couple of decades in building up the network, I've depended on that network to be the providers on how things are delivered to the customer, to help with new technology solutions, to help us be out in front with the innovation. So that network is the building foundation of how our business is actually built. So it's extremely important to us that the network is there and is vibrant, to Nancy's point, and we keep it growing, and that it is welcoming to everybody else that's coming into it, because we really, that network is really our community nationally of how we get things accomplished.
Awesome. Dr. Her?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in my past life, I was a teacher educator, and something I would always tell the teachers is, everyone you meet, everyone you come across is an investment. You just don't know when that will be a part of your network, when that person's going to play an important role professionally, personally. So I would say, both personally and professional networks are so important. Especially in the work that I do, working targeting the Asian community for the most part, although our lending portfolio is quite diverse. That is our target group, and just having had a lot of those connections prior to, not just professionally, but personally, have certainly helped. I can reach out to them and individuals I knew on a personal level, but I know maybe from a certain industry that I've never thought I might need, going to them and say, hey, can you tell me more about this or that? And then that builds that network as well professionally. So I would say there's certainly worth, you just never know. Every person, every situation could be a potential investment.
I love that. I think there are some great nuggets that were shared. I couldn't agree more. So let's keep moving. We know that emotional intelligence is such an important part of being a successful leader, right? So can you women talk a little bit about why emotional intelligence, or what's called EI, is so critically important in order for you to be an effective leader? Whoever wants to jump in first on that one.
All right, I'll go again. I'll get started. So to me, I think emotional intelligence, especially as you're leading an organization or leading a company, that whole concept of emotional intelligence really needs to hit home for you, because it is not about you as an individual. It is really about the organization and the mission and vision of the organization, whether that's a private company and your vision and mission for fulfilling whatever you want to do in the marketplace, or if it's a nonprofit organization, wherever the mission and vision is there. And as a leader, you're really a caretaker of that mission and vision. And so it becomes very important to think about what's the best way to achieve those things, and really use that as a balancing act as you're figuring out how to deal with the different stakeholders and players, right? Whether that's internal teams, external teams, environmental players, other stakeholders out there. All of that is going to come into play. But if you don't have your eye on the prize, which isn't about you, or it's not even about maybe as a key employee or a key client, it's really about the mission and vision of the organization. And if you can't see that clearly, then it's going to be an obstacle for you in order to get there. And that is, as a leader, that is your one and only goal, to get there to the mission and vision.
Now, I would probably add to that, and thank you, Nancy, for putting that so out there so clearly. As a leader of multiple companies, our goal is really to solve the client's problems using technology. But I can't do that without the very brilliant people that work with us and for us. And so that emotional intelligence from my part as a leader means to go to a belonging state where the team feels that they truly are a team in order to accomplish anything. We can't get anything done with one individual. That's just never the way the blueprint rolls out. It takes a team of people to deliver these very complex technology solutions to the client, and people need to be able to work together with that. So I have to sort of set the standard of working together, and you don't have to agree, but we do have to have processes and things that allow us to get to the end where everybody feels like they contributed and everybody feels like the solution, it was the winning right thing to do for the client, because our mission is do the right thing. It's just that simple. It's technologically based, there's a lot of options I have to go down those roads, but the road is always just do the right thing. That the right thing by the customer. We haven't survived for 20 years because we have not chosen to not do the right thing. We're here for 20 years as a minority female tech company because we've always done the right thing. But the team's got to be on board with that.
I loved this question because it really spoke to, again, my background in education. And I taught courses where I talked about different forms of intelligence. And so I'll try hard not to get professorial on us. But, we know that the studies tell us that those with really high IQs are not necessarily the ones who are leading corporations. It's those with high EQs. Emotional intelligence, right? Or EIs, I guess, right? So because it's about relationships, it's about being able to connect with others. The success of one's business organization is based on, at least for many of us, and certainly for mine, it's about how well I can build those relationships, build trust. Can I read individuals? Can I understand what their concerns are? Can I find a way to find mutual ground? And that is so important. So to me, that's what emotional intelligence is being able to understand where those mutual grounds are, being able to build those relationships are so key to not only the success of our business, but the community, and of course to whoever it is that I'm working with.
I love how you said that and tied that all together, Dr. Her. That's so true. And those two questions kind of do have some overlap when we talk about relationships and then even just that emotional intelligence piece. Mm-hmm. So next, we're going to pivot just a little bit and talk about challenges, right? Which, I like to look at challenges as also opportunities, but want to have you ladies just share with our audience how, as you stepped into your leadership role as a CEO, what was your biggest challenge? So this is our moment of transparency. And then after we talk about challenges, we're going to also talk about lessons. So want to hear kind of from your perspective, what was your biggest challenge as you stepped into this important leadership role?
Well, I can start this one since I'm the CEO, but I'm the founder. Okay, which is a little bit different than stepping into a CEO role. I wasn't stepping into a role that somebody had prior to me being there. So being the founder, you end up being founder/CEO. And what I found out in doing that role is my best part is to be the thing I'm best at, which is I'm chief problem solver. And that's what it says on my card. And that says that on my signature. The CEO is somebody that actually runs the structural part of the company, which as a founder, I certainly had to do. But I learned very quickly that wasn't the reason I went into business for myself. I went into business because I liked the problem solving side of the business. So the biggest challenge was to know what I was good at. And to let other people do the things that I wasn't good at and the things I didn't like. Because I think success comes from that. To keep pounding at something that I really didn't like was not the right way to sustain where I was going. I needed to get better at the things that I was already good at and learn to have other people do those other things. Because when you're the founder, you end up generally doing everything. You're chief cook and bottle washer for absolutely everything that goes on. To step into a CEO role, I've been vice president of multiple companies before I went on my own, but it's a little bit different than stepping into that lead role. I had to grow that role. So coming from it in that direction, I had to physically learn what that meant to do that, and then cordon that off those pieces where they belonged to somebody who was excellent at them.
That's great. That's excellent insight. Anyone else want to add or respond to that? What was your biggest challenge stepping into this CEO role?
I would say, I don't know if this part is not a challenge, but I think staying true to who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, at least in my case, and just knowing that there are eyes on you. What are your actions going to be? And really being able to listen to the community and what their needs are, or the folks, the stakeholders, and through the good, the bad, the critics, whatever it might be, is still staying focused and trusting your instinct that, that there's a reason why you're doing things the way that you are, and in the timing that you do. Sometimes, I'm in a different position now than when I was in a different role, and I'm very well aware of that. And that means I may have to deploy a different type of strategy. And so I think that was always a challenge, and still being able to show those who have known me for other work I've done, that I'm still who I am. I'm still, the purpose is still there. The end goal is still the same. But I'm going to approach, the work I do now and working for the community in a different sort of way. So I would say all of those things together would certainly have caused some challenges, but I think good challenges. And it forces me to have to reevaluate myself even more often. And I think that's a good thing.
That is a good thing. Nancy?
Yeah, so I'll say mine parallels Adonica a little bit in terms of, you've got that entrepreneurial curve of starting all of my endeavors, right? So my ad agency is fantastic and continuing to grow. But there was the startup initiative of getting that off the ground, and the what you needed to do from that point. Organic growth is probably the hardest type of growth out there. But I was able to also parlay that into creation of two different non-for-profit organizations. One that I head up now, the Hispanic Collaborative, and then a HPGM, or Hispanic Professionals of Greater Milwaukee, which some of you are probably familiar with. And so, I think that that's the biggest challenge of not just stepping into a leadership role. I had been on the corporate side for 10 years and very familiar with managing teams and managing goals, budgets, etc., the mechanics of being a CEO. But the biggest challenge was doing that from the ground up and pushing organic growth as fast as you could take it.
Great feedback. Great answers. I think that it's so helpful, even myself as an entrepreneur, just listening and jotting down notes. Thank you guys for being so transparent and honest. And this next question, it kind of piggybacks on the previous one, but it's a little more specific, right? So, what lessons have you found helpful in your role as CEOs? So any specific things that you can look to that have maybe helped shape the leader that you are? I think that's something that our audience would love to hear. And of course, I would love to hear too. But if there are any lessons along the way that stick in your mind, feel free to share.
So, Neff, I can kind of continue the experiences that I had just described, right, of the organizations and the efforts that I've led or find myself leading. If I think back to what are the lessons that lead me to be the leader that I am, for me, I think that there's two things. One is you need to understand where you add value and what your strategic purpose is in an organization. There's no nice to haves there. There's no fluffy ways to put it. If you are not adding value on both sides of the equation, yours and your clients or the world, however you want to look at that, close up your shop, right? Because that's not a sustainable model. You have to add true value that people are willing to pay for or invest in or whatever else. So I think that is definitely one of the lessons that I have found most helpful. The other is, I think the saying is, don't let perfect get in the way of great, right, or good, or whatever that is. You're never going to have all of the information that you need to have to make the exact perfect decisions. That doesn't exist in business world or in leadership world. So you need to have the rigor to collect the information that's available to you and what you know at the time, and make the best decision and a plan to move forward. But also having the ability to understand that plans can be tweaked and sometimes should be, right? So how are you creating that that research-based or statistical data-based organization that both can read that quickly and respond to it quickly? And to me, those are two key lessons that I found helpful.
Those are great. Anything else, Adonica or Mayzee, that you want to add?
I would say I'll tag off of what Nancy said, but I'm going to go back to the network. Surround yourself with, people smarter than you. You have to have a mission. You have to have a goal. I'm in for-profit business, but I work with nonprofits, and we still have to have answers that people are willing to pay for. But I don't have to be, the sharpest person that's there in everything that we do. I have to be good at what I do, and I have to go and get other people who can be good at what they do and excellent at what they do. My big one is I always tell people I never strove to be Michael Jordan. I wanted to be Michael Jordan's coach, because everybody gets to go, but sometimes you got superstars and they're sitting in different areas. This is not a one-man show, and we don't do anything as a singular mission provider. It takes the team in order to deliver these things. And I would say the second part of that is don't get in your own way. Some people want to be, they declare themselves leaders and they look behind and nobody's following. So don't get in your own way. Know what it is you're trying to accomplish. Obviously believe in that. Take people with you, but don't be so arrogant that you think that you're the only one that's got all the answers. I've watched lots of my counterparts, and especially during the pandemic, go away because they just got in their own way. And it's like other people have input, other people have good ideas, and leadership is something that, you may be the person out front that gets shot first, but the people behind you got to be willing to still be part of that team. So I would say the biggest one I've learned is just don't get in your own way.
Love it. Dr. Her, any lesson you'd like to share?
Wow, both of those, both Nancy and Adonica had some great ones to add.
Absolutely.
I love that. I would just also add, it's okay to forgive yourself. I think sometimes we, and to continue to learn about yourself and others around you. I love the talk about the sharing about the team, hiring those who are smarter than us or know things that we don't know. Yeah. I love the fact that I have a team like that, and I certainly don't think I know everything, and I think that's so important. So I'm just going to again reiterate what Nancy and Adonica have already said, but I think those were great.
I agree, and I literally took some notes. I love what Nancy said about adding value. That's so important. And, finding answers that people will pay for. I love that, Adonica. So I think that's great. And then to your point, Mayzee, showing ourselves grace and forgiving ourselves. I think that, all three of those things are powerful and critically important for leaders. So I was sent some information about a recent Race to Lead report. I don't know if you guys have heard about it or not. I hadn't, so I went and kind of looked through it a little bit. But according to this recent Race to Lead report, which included nonprofit employees, CEOs, and executive directors of color from Milwaukee, 1 in 3 executive leaders often or always felt they lacked opportunities for advancement compared to 1 in 5 white executive directors and CEOs. Additionally, 1/3 of the CEOs and executive directors that participated in this study were often or always frustrated with the lack of role models and lack of social capital as compared to their white counterparts. So I don't know that any of this is shocking or truly surprising, but I was glad that it was shared with me, and I thought it was worth bringing up during this important conversation. And just want to talk a little bit about the importance of role models and that whole concept of social capital. So in your opinion, as a CEO, how important is it to have role models and mentors, even at your level?
I think there's nowhere that you stop where you should not have role models and mentors. And I think that they should come from every walk of life. Okay. One of the things that I can say that being in IT and sort of growing up in IT, I didn't have the option to have really women mentors or minority mentors coming from the 70s into IT. So I had mentors from everywhere, wherever they were, where they knew that. As I look back, I see that that was a big advantage because I didn't restrict myself to just having a minority female mentor or a female mentor or whatever. I was chasing the tech. And by doing that, it gave me a broader view, I think, of a lot of things. Okay, I am not just inside my own culture. I'm not inside my own gender. I'm not inside my own race. I think that is a mistake to streamline that to where everybody is that looks like you and then say, I don't have this opportunity. The opportunities are where the opportunities are. And I think you have to be where the opportunity is. That's the key. So if that opportunity is sending me to a white male that runs a multi-billion-dollar company, then that's who I want as a mentor, because that's somebody who's there and they're where I want to go. So I think the variety becomes very important. Mine was not intentional. Don't get me wrong. It was a happenstance, but as I look back at it, I see where that happenstance had benefit.
And I would say I agree that the diversity of mentors from all different walks of life is very important. I knew that that's something that was very important to me, was making sure that, I had that and that was learned through other mentors I've had, right? Mm-hmm. That cabinet was so important. And so I knew that was important, that I had to have that as well. I'm listening to Adana and what she explained, and I desperately searched for those who look like me, came from a similar background than me to mentor. And even to this day, there aren't enough. Right. But I was very fortunate to have others. I feel very blessed to have others from all different walks of life. But, at the same time, many of them were male, all the way up through college, from high school to college and into the profession. Many of them were male and not necessarily Asian, but I always felt like there was something missing. I knew that there was an experience there that they didn't have, that I had, that I desperately needed as well. Because and luckily over time, I've been able to build those relationships and find those mentors, those people I could have in my cabinet, I guess you could say. But there certainly could be more of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely agree with what Mayzee and Adonica are saying. And I think the fact of the matter is that there aren't enough CEOs of color out there yet, CEOs or executive directors, and those of us who are in those roles would love to see more, right? But this is how we do it, right? How do we begin to eat the elephant one bite at a time? And while we might all be disheartened at the pace of change, that doesn't mean that we can't keep our own foot on the gas pedal and help that, right? And I often question myself as CEOs, we're not just influencing our own organizations. Many of us might sit on different boards of directors or have our own network of influence. We need to understand what conversations can we push that will help change that agenda, right? That will help change the number of executive directors and CEOs of colors, that there's going to be greater intentionality and support behind that, and make sure that pace becomes a little faster.
All great points. And I'm looking at the clock, and we're about halfway through, and we have several questions that have come in through the chat. So I want to make sure I get to those because our audience is listening and they have questions to ask. So and again, jump in as you feel led to do so. So the first question that's come in from the chat is, as women of color, are there some additional challenges to overcome regarding leadership and growing a business? Which is a really good question. And I'm sure y'all have some answers to share on that.
A little depends. I would say more often than not, because I am not. Women are expected to be in leadership roles in some places, right? Not in technology. All right, that is not where they expect to see me show up. I can easily say for the last 4 decades, I am generally the only minority in the room, and I am generally almost always the only female in the room still, even with other white females or whatever. So, and especially if it gets to an executive level and that type of thing. I think it goes back to what we were saying, and I think Dr. Her said that be yourself, be true to yourself. I know what I'm good at. I know why I'm there. I know what I'm trying to accomplish, and those things ground you, and you have to stay grounded in that. I'm not worried about the fact that people look at you weird, or sometimes it's still, and they think maybe you, even though you're not dressed that way, you're part of the wait staff or what. I mean, seriously, there's been some crazy stuff out there. You just have to meet people where they are, and sometimes people are ignorant. And it's not okay, but it doesn't make you change who you are and the persona of how you present yourself. So I would say that's probably the most important piece. I live in a world that's still, unfortunately, predominantly male-based. It just is. And I don't, as much as I have done what I can do for that, and I'm a big STEM proponent and all those other things, and I'm on a million boards for that. It's not going to change overnight, to go back to what Nancy said. It's not going to change overnight. So I have to remember who I am, what I represent. And sometimes it's not just about me being the president of a BACSN. It's me representing the other people that these folks have to interact with, and making sure that that's a positive thing, to where maybe they have a different reaction the next time that they see somebody who looks like me in this field walk in a room.
Neff, I'll answer this question, and I agree with what Adonica was saying, but I'll answer this question by going back to something that you said, which is you see challenges as opportunities. And I think many leaders and many business owners will say the same thing. Yeah. Well, and this is certainly one of them. Let's face it, our networks as female women, female and women of color leaders, our networks and how we action them look very, very different than your traditional white male CEO's network. Very different. And so they can do different things, right? Some things are going to be easier for us to do. Some things are going to be harder for us to do. So yes, absolutely, those differences exist, but nowhere at least in my lifetime, and hopefully that will change as we keep going forward, nowhere has there been more attention on developing leaders of color, right? And helping small businesses with Black and brown owners, been more of a focus of more people in the United States. So how are we using that as an opportunity? Use that attention and desire, understand that means that there's a whole lot of people and a whole lot of resources that want to help you succeed. So we have to understand there's an opportunity to leverage there, and it's up to us, if that's what we want, to jump in with both feet and leverage that opportunity.
Yeah, I just like to tag on to Nancy and say, you're exactly right, because I got into this position because that happened in the 70s, right? A portal opened and you had to take advantage of what was there, the training, the education, the opportunity. And Nancy, you're 1,000% right. That opportunity is sitting there on a platter. right this minute. And people have to, know it's there, and it's there. And they have to have a strategic plan to take advantage of that, because it won't stay. You know, like most portals, it opens and it closes, and it won't stay. So we have to produce as many folks who are like us as possible inside of that realm to push forward.
It is a portal. I could not agree more. Okay, so now is the moment. If not now, then when? We're definitely in a special moment in time. So we should all be leaning in. So next question from our viewing audience, and we've talked a little bit about this, and so maybe we can dig in a little bit deeper. This question is, how do you lead with your full self? Have you doubted or hesitated bringing your full self to the table? And several of you have kind of talked about that and how important that is in leadership. But I think this question is more to the how, right? Okay, now we know we need to do it, but if there's any specific guidance or best practices perhaps, or resources that you all can share, I think this specific question is asking, well, how do I do that?
I'll go ahead and start by saying, I think that's a constant question. I think is, how do I? Again, goes back to, I think, the question, the point I made earlier about being your authentic self. And I might communicate in one circle of people or a group of people differently than I do somewhere else, just because the language changes, right? But I'm still the same person. I'm still sending the same message. And what are you willing to, at least for me, what do I sacrifice and what do I don't sacrifice in those moments? Those are things, what do I not, I'm not articulating myself the best right now, but I hope that makes some sense. What do I want people to, I can't say, well, I'll go back to that, not sacrifice about myself, just letting people know that this is my stance on something, right? It's not going to change no matter where I am. I think that also, I know that applying for the job that I am in right now for the current position, that was very important for my board to understand who I am and what I bring to the table, and that made it a lot easier, of course, bringing that to this position once I was hired. And if I'm not going to be able to bring my full self to the table, then perhaps this position isn't the one for me, right? So I think those are things that need to be considered.
And I think you're talking about too, Dr. Her. It's like, what are my non-negotiables, right? Some things
that's the word.
I can meet you halfway on, but there are some things that I'm not willing to negotiate. And to your point, being very clear about that. Yes. And that's great advice. Anyone else have anything to add about it? About the how? And the questions are continuing to come in, so we can certainly move on. So the next question is, when you started your career, did you imagine you would end up as a CEO? And several of you are founders, so you probably will have a different perspective than, as Dr. Her just explained, her application process for this important role. So do any of you want to chime in on that? When you started, did you imagine that you would end up, long-term CEO and kind of continuing to lead these organizations? Maybe we can start with you, Nancy and Adonica, and then jump down to Dr. Her.
So CEO, I'm not sure if I would have categorized it that way, but I certainly felt that my ability and my passion and my desire to do good I would definitely be most successful in a realm where I had strong control over that. And I didn't necessarily, that was something that I learned. I mean, I started off on the corporate side for 10 years and I'm very grateful for that wonderful opportunity, but it also helped me learn myself. And, I think different organizations have different levels of risk, right? And there's a certain risk element to large corporations, a certain pace of movement, and that's very different in a more entrepreneurial or smaller organizations. And you need to understand, your particular skill set and how you operate and what's going to allow you to do the best thing. So I definitely kind of had an idea of where that was for myself. I wouldn't have named it by title at that time frame, right, as before I started my career, but had an idea.
I'll probably jump off of that and said I had no idea and no desire, and didn't want to go in that direction. I mean, when I started off my career as a young engineer, my goal was just to learn as much stuff as possible. And as I moved into more and more positions of being a team leader or project manager or those types of things, what I've discovered, and Nancy sort of alluded to this on the front, is I've learned that the best way I can control things is to be a servant leader. It is easier. It is better. It holds more of my team together. People tend to like that. It keeps the group around. I mean, I've got people I've been working with for 3 decades. They will go somewhere and come back because I work with a lot of contractors and that kind of thing. And they will actually bring me business because it's more that I had to learn to settle into that role of certain servant leader. I don't need to be out front and be the leader all the time. It's not necessary. I've earned that spot, I guess is what it is. And other people may see me as that more than I see myself as that. I see myself as I contribute this to the team. This is what I know how to do. This is what I'm good at. Everybody gather around and we do it. Obviously, I own the company. I am the president and the CEO, so I get the last say. But I never put that on the table because it's never necessary. You know, it's there if I have to use it, but it's never the smoking gun that's ever. I can honestly say in 20 years, I've probably only used it twice, to where I have to shut something down and say, no, we're not doing that. Okay. But other than that, I had no idea. That was not the direction. It was not the point. I had other people who saw that in me and said, that's where you need to start moving. That's that network piece and the mentor piece we talked about. I had other people recognize in me what I wasn't recognizing in myself, which is the value of good mentors.
Absolutely. And what about you, Dr. Her? I mean, you've had a different path as far as going for this job and being CEO. So do you want to talk about
Sure. Yeah, I'll say this. No, I did not ever imagine becoming a CEO. However, I will say this. I knew that, and I was very, fortunate. Grew up in a home where my parents said, you can be anything you want to be, right? Yes. And believe in yourself, right? So I felt that to the core. I believed it to my core naively, even many times, and finding out otherwise, right? That it wasn't exactly what Dad had told me the world is, and that I still had to deal with those who try to step on me, right, and make me feel less than what I felt I was capable of. And so I led my life with a sense of, I can be anything. I can do the best I can, and I can achieve, and in a love for community. And I think and just finding that building relationships. We talked about emotional intelligence earlier. The combination of those things, I think, have. I love what you said, Adana. I've earned this position. Right, earned this place, I think, with the combination of those experiences and parts of who I am. But no, it was not something I sought necessarily.
Love it. Okay, so next question is, when organizations look to intentionally recruit and hire women and leaders of color, what are the most important considerations that need to be kept in mind? So if an organization is trying, they're putting forth the effort, they're trying to be intentional about that diversity and inclusion piece, they want to recruit women and leaders of colors, women of color rather, what are the most important things that they should keep top of mind when making that effort?
Boy, I'm going to give you a hard one on that, Neff. Because we kind of dabble in that realm. I think the first thing they need to do is look internally. And they need to be serious. They need to look internally, because an organization, and we've seen a lot of this, because of where we are with DE&I and all this other stuff. Everybody stepped up to the plate and said, we're going to do all these things. And they didn't look internally to see that they could ingest what they just bit off. Okay. They will ask for folks who look like us on this panel, and then they don't want to listen. They can ask for folks who bring in any type of diversity, and they don't want to change. They want to just keep going down. The organization that ingests, I think, any type of diversity, it needs to look inward and say, what are we willing to do to make sure that this change we're making works? And I don't think the majority of them have done that. I mean, I've just lived too long. I'm watching it. It's happening every day. They pursue very good qualified talent, and then they sort of destroy it because those people are turning over in 2+ years, if it takes that long.
Oh,
because
yeah.
the organization they never thought about what they were asking themselves to do. So I would say that that's the first thing. You want to ingest somebody, you need to know what impact that has. I mean, I got grandkids. They keep getting these animals that they bring into the house. You know, what does it mean to bring a gecko into the family? I mean, seriously, something that trivial can just disrupt an entire environment. So you're talking about a human being.
Right.
And you talk about the other human beings that it affects. And what I see is a lack of the work it takes. Besides saying, I want to go hire this person that's X. And I mean, it's just been my experience. It's been my observation. And I would say to any company that is serious about it, look inward first and figure out what it is you can ingest before you not only upset the apple cart of the business, but you upset that person's life as well. It's not fair. So.
No, that's powerful. And ultimately you're saying, you know, look internal before external, right?
Yes.
So
yeah. Dude,
there's some value there. And I just got the 10-minute warning. So I want to get through about 2 more questions before we have to wrap up this great conversation. I could talk about this stuff all day. So, okay. You guys are doing fantastic. So, this one is more geared towards younger women, and I think it's an important question that can add value to the folks who are listening. So for young women who are, for instance, managers, or perhaps they're just becoming leaders or looking ahead in their careers, can you talk about your experience with power and perhaps share some advice for young women who might be interested in or are currently pursuing that leadership track? So, you know, again, thinking about a new manager who's never managed a team before, who's kind of stepping into that leadership role, any nuggets, any solid advice that we could give to young women who maybe aspire to be like you amazing ladies when they grow up?
So Neff, I would tell them to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? They're going to have to push themselves to be in uncomfortable situations in order for them to grow and get what they want. And what I mean by that is they need to get comfortable in making sure that they share their vision with others, right? You know, as women, we tend to keep our heads down and do our work diligently and well and think that recognition is going to come and we will get promoted, and nothing could be farther from the truth. That's a myth, right? And so we need to readjust our own emotional intelligence side to recognize that and say, I need to be comfortable promoting myself. I need to be comfortable sharing that, yes, I do see myself in your position someday or in your boss's position someday, and you're looking for allies to help you get there. And so, I would tell them, get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
That's great advice. And having that courage to say that. I mean, sometimes that's scary for us as women. Any other nuggets or advice that?
Neff, I was just going to add that, you know, look at those and listen to those who've come before you. I think that's very important. I think many of us often feel, oh, well, I know enough. I'm enough. My current generation of friends are enough. But it isn't. It's so important to really observe, listen to, seek out those who have been there before you. And they may not always have the answers. Times are different, but you need to be the individual who decides, what you will take from it, what you won't. I often share this in the Hmong culture. We have this saying that says, take what you will from what I'm saying, and then throw away the rest. Right? That's what doesn't apply. And I think that's so important to listen to those who have been there before you, and then take what's worth applying to your life, and go from there.
Yep, that's very, very, very wise. And so at the 5-minute mark, we have one more question from the audience that I want to make sure we address. And Dr. Her, you've kind of talked a little bit about your parents and your upbringing. So this kind of ties into that. I'd love to hear from you, Nancy, and Adonica about this. It says, related to the mentorship question, what role did your parents / leader figures play in guiding the discovery of yourself and your leadership capabilities? So I think that's a great question to round out this conversation. It's kind of taking it back to where it all started and looking back at how perhaps your upbringings may have played an important role in actually you being where you are today. So anyone want to share more about what role your parents played?
Well, I can start with that. I had a young teenage mother that when I was born, but her mother, my grandmother, was a pretty good pioneer of believing, just like Dr. Her said, you can do whatever it is you set your mind to do. And that was what I heard all my life. And it was a matriarchal family. And you can do whatever it is you set your mind to do. You're just as smart as everybody else that's around you. And there's no reason that you always have to feel second class or whatever. Just, be open-minded, go after it. And, as she said, take what you can from other people who are giving you information, use that information and keep going. So a big believer in lifelong learning. You're never finished was her statement. You're never finished.
Love it. Nancy?
Yeah, I grew up in a very traditional Latino household, right? Very conservative, as many Latino families are. And, I think the biggest thing that I pulled away from it, and I had 2 working parents, which is often the case in Latino families here. And my mom probably was in, she had leadership roles, right? And seeing that as an adult looking back is very special to me. But I think that the thing that I pull most from them is, there was this concept that they both talked about and was understood from a cultural perspective for us, which is, to those who are with freedoms and rights and privilege, right, however you want to look at that those also come with responsibilities. And that was something that I really internalized from the responsibility side. And one of the biggest responsibilities that I feel, which I've carried with me and I think really helped shape me as a servant leader, is this responsibility of continuous learning and continuous improvement, right? Both in yourself, for your organization, and those who you serve as a leadership role. So that's something I'm very grateful for, but that's one of the things I think that defines me and really goes right back to kind of how I was brought up.
That's super powerful. And Dr. Her, I know you kind of already talked about your dad, but I don't know if you wanted to add anything else as we wrap up today's conversation.
No, I thought that I've shared what I did. And I think one of the last pieces I'll leave is my dad would always say, I observed him greatly growing up as a leader. And he'd always say, the more that your name is out there, the more responsibility you have. There'll be those who love you, but there'll always be those too at the same time who are going to be even more critical. And just, being true to who you are, I think is very important, and focused is very important.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to our time. Again, I want to thank all of you out there for joining us for this dynamic discussion. I know I've enjoyed it. I hope that you have as well. Please share it, encourage friends and folks in your network to watch the playback. And on that note, I'm going to wrap it up on behalf of Madison 365. I want to say have a great rest of the week, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.
This is 365 Media.